Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Science Business Webcast conference on COVID-19, the pandemic, and how it affects universities and the research ecosystems that they operate in. My name is Carlos Hertel. I'm a director and board member of Science Business, and I will be your host for this panel discussion today. I do have four panelists with me, four prestigious panelists, and I start out with Karina Angelieva. She is the Deputy Minister of Education and Science of the Republic of Bulgaria. Karina is joined on the panel by Saladin Chivu, who is the Global Head of Discovery and Investigative Science Safety at Novartis, as all of you know, a global pharma company. We also on the panel have Andreas Mortensen, the Vice President for Research at EPFL Lausanne, a university, technical university in particular. And we finally have the fourth panelist as Robert Jan Smits, the president of the Eindhoven University of Technology, who many of you will still remember from his years as director for DG Research and Technology Development at the European Commission. Before we begin the discussion with the four panelists, I also like to introduce my co-moderator for today, Marilyn Fiaschi, who is the managing director of Science Business. Marilyn, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Carlos. So just a word of introduction for me. For those who don't know, Science Business is a news and communications company specialized in research and innovation policy in the EU, but also increasingly around the world. We also run a network that brings together multinationals, leading research universities and government organizations that work together to accelerate innovation. Among our speakers today, I should say that both Novartis and EPFL are members of the network. As a news company, Science Business has deployed big efforts to provide a high quality coverage of COVID research from an international perspective. And in fact, in the last weeks, we have launched a series of initiatives, all focused on COVID research. So just to name them very quickly, we have a live blog of R&D developments in the field, a database of funding opportunities around the world, a partnership with a matchmaking platform called Crowdelix. And we've also launched this series of webcasts, today being one of them, webcasts around hot research topics. And all this in addition to our usual newsletters and social media activities. So what is our objective? Well, it is pretty much to help the global research community come together and get the intelligence it needs to manage this crisis better and faster. Not an easy task. But today you are over 1,000 people watching this webcast. So again, a warm welcome to each of you and especially to the members of our network. A technical point from me, during the webcasts, you in the audience will be able to ask questions to the panel. And to do so, please use Twitter by tagging Science Business. So the Science Business handle is CBUS, SCIBUS, and using two hashtags, hashtag SBFutures and hashtag COVID-19. All of that is on the web page where you are watching right now. So my colleagues are monitoring the Twitter activity, and I will be reading out your questions to our panel. So with this, Carlos, over to you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. To set the stage for my panelists a little bit, let me try to use an analogous situation to the ecosystems we have in research. Think of the ecosystems in industry, which you might call supply chains. And that's one of the big discussions we have today. Supply chains have been stretching out all over the globe. And when there is disruption for whatever reason, all of a sudden those things that used to flow no longer flow and products can't be put together, services can't be delivered, which makes companies in a situation like that rethink their strategy around supply chains, if you will, rethinking their strategy around their ecosystems. The situation in academia and research is a little different, but I think there are some similarities to it, and we'll touch upon some of those today in our discussions. I like to start out with Robert Jan, who is in Eindhoven in a very special situation that the university has deliberately taken a path of tight integration with the technology environment that they are in, and that of course now is significantly experiencing the difficulties that we all just described. Robert Jan, give us an idea of where the situation in Eindhoven is today and what challenges you do see.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos, and Science Business, a great initiative. Let me just start by saying a couple of words about this innovation ecosystem in Eindhoven. It's called Brainport, and it was once described by Forbes as the most innovative innovation ecosystem in the world. And it is a home to one of the biggest high-tech companies of the Netherlands and of Europe, Philips, ASML, NXP, DAF Trucks, VDL, but also of hundreds of high-tech startups such as ProDrive and the database company called Study Portals, which I think many of you know. These companies are responsible for generating in this small area around Eindhoven half of the patents which are filed in the Netherlands, so that's quite impressive. And they have a turnover around 50 billion euro. Now, the Eindhoven University of Technology is at the core of the innovation ecosystem. As a matter of fact, the university was created at the very initiative of the companies in the area. 65 years ago, Philips, DAF Trucks, they said, we want to have a university with whom we can work. And that's still our core mission today. We are educating, training engineers for the region, for the innovation ecosystem. We are working together with companies to extend the frontiers of knowledge. And you see, therefore, that a lot of our students, they do their thesis, their final work in companies on specific challenges which the companies formulate. And also a lot of our staff, academic staff, works 1 day a week with us at the university and for the rest with the companies. So we are completely integrated in this innovation ecosystem as university. But at the same time, you can also imagine the vulnerability of that and how the current crisis, the corona crisis, is affecting us since we are so much interconnected with these high-tech companies. We see, however, at the moment that all the high-tech companies with whom we have signed contracts, with whom we do research together, with whom where our students go to for their final projects, they all are respecting the contracts we have signed so far. So we don't see any disruption. But it is clear that when we are moving into this recession, which everyone is predicting, which could perhaps even be for a country like the Netherlands up to 7.5%, this will have consequences, of course, on the companies, but it will also have consequences on the university with regard to, of course, our cooperation agreements, our contracts with these universities, our publication, joint publication efforts with these companies, but also with regard, of course, to our students finding a place inside the companies or working with a thesis together with companies. So far, we are not seeing yet any, say, concrete things, but we are, of course, fearing that once the recession hits in big time, we are going to face trouble also as a university for the reasons I just mentioned. And that's why, and it's a little bit the bridge, of course, to the later discussion, it's so essential that the government at national level, but also the European Union kicks in with big stimuli packages to really boost the economy and to make sure that innovation continues so that we can come out of the crisis much stronger than we were before. So this just as a short introduction from my side about where we stand. And let's also be clear about another thing. A lot of universities, not only in the Netherlands, but in Europe and in the West as a whole, will be confronted with disruption of the flow of talented international students coming from China and India. And some predict that it may last at least 2 to 3 years before this flow of top talents is coming back to the West. And our university, for instance, in Eindhoven, 50% of all our PhD students come from outside Europe. So that means also there that we might see also less international students for the years to come. Difficult to predict all this, but we need to make sure that we do everything jointly together with the triple helix to get out of this economic crisis stronger, with stronger innovation. And that's why I look forward also to discuss possible governmental measures in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert Jan. Let me move over to a different kind of ecosystem. I mean, yours is a local one, if you will, a very special one, but there's also a sector that is known for being very closely integrated between industry and universities and small spin-outs from universities too, I should add that. And that is the pharma sector that has made it almost a way of life over the past 10, 15 years. And there's a number of reasons for this development, but they stand out today among other industries for the way they do interact with the academic sector. And I'd like, Saladin, you to give us an idea of where that stands and what impact you see today, since two things are true. One thing is your sector is in the limelight. Pharma companies are expected to deliver. At the same time, some of your critical partners may experiencing stresses, so like the companies themselves. So working under somewhat harder conditions and yet being expected to deliver even faster and better, that's quite a challenge, I guess. Give us an idea of where that stands.
Thank you, Carlos, and hi, everyone. So again, thank you for inviting me, Science and Business, to this meeting, and I welcome you somehow at home. So if you see a door opening and people getting in, don't just be afraid. This is the way we are working nowadays. Yeah, the pharma industry and Novartis particularly, yeah, this is a difficult time for everyone, and we are adjusting to it by many means. As you know, we have to continue to produce and deliver essential products, essential medicines for patients who are not impacted by COVID-19, but there are other patients, you know, suffering from different kinds of disease that still need to have the compounds and the disease and the medicines. So we have to do that, and we are doing it. So we have a lot of our colleagues who are going to work, you know, every day to ensure that this is working. In terms of the collaboration, so what we see here is that we have received hundreds of requests from investigators, from clinical centers, to use some of our compounds to be tested in clinical trials, you know, in what we called IITs, investigator-initiated trials. So we usually take some time, you know, to review those processes. We have put a process in place to expedite all the reviews to make it very fast and collaborate as fast as possible with those tests. And so we have provided our compounds, you know, to a lot of investigators. So that's one aspect. Now, from the collaboration per se, see what you're observing now is a boost of collaboration and partnership. So we were collaborating, as you said, that's our nature. We have to work, you know, with our partners in academia and clinical centers, etc. But in the context of the crisis now, despite the fact that we cannot move on and see people, we are using digital technologies as we do today, and we have been able to ensure a lot of activities that will continue. And let me share with you one example of collaboration that we are doing now. First of all, before we get to the big ones, together and have something that we can test together. That was more complex in the past.
Yeah, Saladin, we do have problems with your connection. We can't hear you for the moment. You may want to switch the connection.
I think we have been interrupted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now on the phone. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So in this situation, there's one initiative that I would like to share with everyone. This is called the IMI, the Innovative Medicine Initiative, sorry, which has been created some kind of 10 years ago. It's a partnership between the pharma industry and the European Commission, and it is aiming at bringing together all the talented people from industry and academics to work together and tackle some big issues. So we have built up some infrastructures over the past years and worked on different programs, going from basic research to market access, ways of doing things, and new technology development, etc. In the context of the crisis now with the COVID-19, we have decided jointly with the Commission and the pharma industry to launch a call for projects, you know, to potentially support the research and development of new therapeutics for against coronavirus. And what we, so I think I'm back.
Can you see me? Okay.
Okay.
So I can. So sorry for the interruption. That's the way we are living nowadays. So what we have done. So we have when we launched a call in end of February to try to mobilize all our brains from industry and academia and think about what could be the proposals that would be able to first work in a short term to identify or repurpose compounds that are existing that could be used against this coronavirus. And that's one of the pillar. The second pillar is thinking more on the long term. Can we work together and screening and have a more fundamental work to identify therapeutics that would work against pan-coronaviruses? This one, previous ones, and future ones coming. And there was one aspect as well that has been discussed to work on potential diagnostics. So
we have been losing you, unfortunately, again. You may want to stay on your phone for good, I guess. I'm not sure if Saladin can hear us, but maybe to just. All right, yeah, you may want to stay on the phone, I guess. The computer connection is just unstable.
So you will not see anyone getting in my office, basically.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So this particular project now is putting certain companies together, and we Novartis are sharing a library of compounds that we have available for infectious disease and antivirals, and as other companies are doing. So we put that at disposition. So the screening has already been started with some of the academics. You know, we are using some infrastructures in different places in Europe. So for me, it's really an example where we have invested in Europe to build up this infrastructure called IMI, and it's paying off because we have been able to go very quickly to put things together, put infrastructures, and move on. So I think it's an example of collaboration that is actually boosted now by this coronavirus issue. And I'm happy to talk later if you have some questions about where we would see the future going. But for now, that's where we put our effort, you know, in working really together with whomever is able to help on trying to find a scientific solution to this problem. And it's back to you, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much, Saladin. Let me move over to Andreas with a question around the interaction between universities. That's also a kind of an ecosystem as it has evolved. Today, research is so internationally connected. I may have a study done in my department, but I do need inputs from someone far away. I may actually have to send my PhD candidates or other students to another lab. That lab is closed. Unfortunately, it may be closed for several months. My student is close to finishing the project. Not much gets produced anymore in terms of data. All this creates issues, a hassle, and worries among the scientists. And some might say, was that a great strategy that we try to go global like that? Maybe we should just keep things closer to home. What I can do in my lab, at least, I have a greater amount of control of. I'm not left to the devices of some other country that may take measures that are much more extensive than my country's is, so I'm much more impeded in my work. So when you work internationally between university, Andreas, do you think that people might be wondering if that isn't a too risky strategy in the future when disruptions can come at any moment in time?
I'm tempted to say definitely not. If only to put maybe a weird twist on it. It is a fact that we got shut down pretty much simultaneously. So there is even a form of solidarity in what we're living through that probably has built more closeness rather than distance between collaborators across countries and even continents. The presence of the person isn't quite needed anymore. I mean, this webinar is proof of it. The number of things that you can do without having to travel is huge. And I don't think the current disruption has made that notion smaller. The thing, of course, which everybody has to go through, and again, we do that together, is disruption. I mean, we have to pretty much stop completely or temporarily, of course, experimental work. We're gradually getting back in gear. At EPFL, we're going to do so in a couple of weeks. Gradually, that said, the first priority is health. But for the ecosystem itself, I don't think much harm has been done. except on one front, which Robert Jan pointed out very rightly, which is the difficulty, the increased difficulty, because there the time span is much longer, that there is in having long-term visits, and often for dumb reasons like visas or travel or even leases on apartments and the like. So that I think will maybe take a bit of a hit. But if you look at the ecosystem as something which has gone global, I think it's gone global in crisis. And if anything, it has certainly not been weakened, maybe strengthened, because the level of interaction that comes, and that's the second message I want to give, the level of interaction that comes out of the fact that we suddenly, many of us, have quickly turned on our heels and decided to attack together with common awareness of what's going on up, down, left, and right. Some level of competition, of course, but a lot of solidarity in addressing this global crisis. I think that has increased the level of community feeling for the entire scientific and even applied science ecosystem.
Okay, let me follow up with a brief question. That's an interesting perspective. You're right that everybody is in it at the same time, which indeed may help. But when you say it might even strengthen the connections, while I guess industry would want to strengthen connections or at least keep it the way it is, for them it's a bit of a, I would say, risk management issue, right? Can I have the benefits of the connectivity to faraway places and stay sufficiently safe from a business standpoint, which often boils down to either financials or not being able to deliver what customers do expect. So while the desire to keep it as it is may be there, will the risk not outweigh the opportunity? I take from you to say no, but can you give me a little bit of a better sense why it is different from what we kind of hear from industry companies?
Yeah, I think Robert Jan again gave part of the answer in saying that what will happen, at least as far as I can throw, and my colleagues as well, what will happen will be probably more dependent, not so much on the academic partners' temporary, and I insist on temporary, inability to deliver because experimental work has stopped, but more on the actual economic conditions that will prevail once the whole apparatus gets up and running again. The difficulties, as far as I can throw, will probably more come from financial tightness rather than default or lack of presence or lack of reactivity on part of academics who, after all, will have experienced a temporary shutdown in experimental work. Don't forget that when you work on even on an experimental program, there are many things that you do in your office. There are even benefits to pausing sometimes. I'm an experimentalist myself. My PhD students are acquiring new skills that I know will be useful once they get up and running in the lab again. I don't think the ecosystem itself or the partnerships will take per se a hit. It's more the financial disruption that I think might hit us hard. I know if Robert Jan would agree, but
perhaps I can comment on that one. I think that you're absolutely right. What I see at the moment happening is that in the crisis, more than ever before, the innovation ecosystem gets together. The cooperation, the interaction with the companies in the Eindhoven region, the university, but also the local government has never been so good and so intense. And we now want to do everything together, also to serve, the citizens and the patients. We are making mouth masks together. We are looking into how we can make ventilators. So we are joining forces now to see what we can do at the moment as we speak to help to overcome the crisis. With regards to the longer term, there, of course, a lot will depend on whether there's going to be a recession or not. And if there will be the type of recession like IMF or the World Bank or the OECD is predicting, then of course it will force the high-tech companies to rethink about their strategy. And that will certainly have consequences for certain forms of cooperation. So I think at the moment, I fully agree on that the cooperation has never been as good as now, because in a crisis you find each other and you really realize once again how important you are for each other. But I think in the longer term, a lot depends on, of course, on the deep pockets the government has and on the deep pockets of the companies have, and how long this crisis will be with us. And unfortunately, and that's something we have seen over many crises, economic crises in the year, the departments which are cut most often in times of crisis by companies are the R&D departments, unfortunately as it is. So let's really hope that that will not be the case this time, and let's therefore hope that we can go gradually back to normal as soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Robert Jan, and thank you also, Andreas, for that perspective. I think it's high time now that we bring the politics into the mix here. It's a beautiful segue when you said that the local government has been very helpful as well. Before I hand over to Karina, let me just share with you a snippet from a discussion I recently had with someone who was talking to the state government, one state government in Germany here, and the state government said, you know, everybody is in need. And if we had to make a rank order of those in the greatest needs and those in lesser need, we would start probably with the arts sector, in a sense, performing arts and so on, where business is zero fundamentally for them. We would then, of course, have the hospitals at very first. There's no doubt about it. Depends on the state. And then the education and research sector probably comes after those two. And maybe there's other things we have to do as well. It's not a lack of willingness. It's just a matter of, I only have so much money to spend. And where do I start? Who has the greatest pain at this moment? I think that's a challenge that policymakers right now do have. Karina, maybe you can give us a perspective on how policy in Bulgaria, but you can make it broader, of course, if you like, how the whole situation around research, universities, and their ecosystem looks from a political standpoint. And then also say, what do you think politics should do at this moment to make sure there's no lasting damage done to these ecosystems as they grew over the years?
Thank you very much, Carlos, and thanks also to Science Business for this initiative, and also to the previous speakers, because they gave a lot of food for thought. And maybe I want to start with a kind of a different approach, because basically I totally agree that maybe COVID-19 and this pandemic really caused a lot of damages and fears, but really united much more the research and innovation sector. I've never attended so many ministerial meetings with ministers from all around the world every 2 weeks. So basically it's much more collaborative now. On one hand, but if I have to give our perspective from Bulgaria, I have to tell you that our biggest concern already from the beginning was, of course, how we were sure the overall teaching process. So I slightly disagree that research and education are at the end of the agenda, because already from the beginning, our biggest concern is how to assure, of course, the graduation of the kids, and basically to reach an agreement all over in Europe and beyond, to give a fair chances to our young generation of students to choose the university they want to choose. And basically we have a lot of students going to many member states, including Netherlands, Germany, Spain, and beyond already, unfortunately, Europe, UK, and the States. So this is our main priority. We were very worried, and I have to tell you that while we were thinking how we will arrange the office, the things, basically the universities themselves and the schools were ready, and they hopped on distance learning and education really in amazing speed. We were recently making some jokes, because it's also nice to keep the sense of humor a little bit nowadays with the minister, that maybe the only strategy we fulfill is the ICT strategy for education at universities. So, of course, I don't hide here that now we see really what does it mean investments in research and investments, and especially in digital technologies, because especially in engineering sciences, especially vet education, is really suffering right now, because distance learning, online learning can replace many things, but not exactly the practices and really the experience on ground or in the company. So we are also trying now to cope with this, but basically also concerning medical universities, now we have a huge challenge, of course, to cope with these delays, and also not to somehow prevent the students to graduate those disciplines, and not forget what we are also concerned as politicians, but also as responsible for education and research, and this is basically to keep the quality. So this is also another challenge nowadays. And I think that it's extremely important to take lessons now from this crisis, and not to wait, of course, the crisis to finish and then to start to think again, but already from now to basically unite and push for some really new stimulus on European level. Because for me, what is clear now, we see that we were a bit, let's say, slow last years, was really to introduce a strategic European agenda for skills. We need common standards for quality. We need much more connectiveness all over Europe, especially among the universities, because and now very quickly we have to unite capacities on national level and really to open data, and also to publish profiles and to find national level, on local level, who has the expertise, the equipment, the experience to do research, not only basically in biomedical sciences, but also in different material sciences, environment, not forget the social aspects and economical aspects. And no one member state can, or community, research community from one state can deal with this. And I believe that here we a little bit of discrepancies we saw again, because why we had to wait for this crisis to see that we need also quantity and critical mass also in Europe to fight against this pandemic. But I really strongly believe that on the contrary, this situation now is showing that much more interconnection and strategic collaboration all over Europe is needed. Now, what is challenging us now is indeed the financial recession and the changed economical situation after the crisis, which may hit local economies and, of course, in this respect, universities. I believe that now we also should change a little bit our way of conservative thinking and introduce already from already 2 decades, basically, we're talking for European research area, and about the mission approach in universities. And universities themselves have to be responsible and not to wait for the governments to find the right mix, but they also should be more proactive and to find their own mission that can help the revival of local economy, but not only, also of the local and national quality of life, I must say, because previously we commented, we do it with some other colleagues, that in fact now we read how many forecasts have been made from researchers, from leading people from this community last years, and now they were saying, we were telling you. Okay, I agree that politicians not always hear very well, but also politician changes, and the research innovation system is growing, so to speak, but there is a really very strong sustainability and collaboration. So I think also the voice of the research and innovation community should change a bit and be more proactive. But concerning also industry, I must say that also the industry shouldn't somehow take it always for granted. Now we are in the same boat for the first time. The universities, the industries, the governments, we all should find the right mix. And if we now again wait someone to cope on its own from a kind of a selfish perspective, we need more money than you, I think it will be very damaging, of course, and we should really reconsider what we should put on the agenda as a scope and topics, And secondly, as financial instruments, funding, but also as probably taxes and taxation stimulus. Because you see what happened the last 6 months, we were only talking for a Green Deal. Now we are only talking for COVID-19. I'm now trying to be provocative to your also audience. I think this is counterproductive. We should have an overall agreement in Europe, and here I monitor all the politicians in my field now. They are talking that the most important now is the quality of life of people, the safety of people, the human lives. So this should unite us, and we shouldn't every time on every 6 months argue what we should be more important. We should fund a Green Deal, or we should fund infection diseases. We should have an overall agreement that quality of life and preparatory actions for next epidemics or diseases should be really on the agenda. And last but not least, I'm very curious here from my colleagues to hear also from their perspective what they think for the younger generation now. Basically, we are quite worried because we don't want to prevent our youngsters to feel that they are deprived from the future that we had. They also had dreams to go to university, to do research career, to collaborate, to have social life. We can't constantly tell them, you have now everything, internet, and everything is the same. It's not the same for them. And I think it is very important that we, the politicians, listen to stakeholders to tell us some good ideas how to cope with this challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karina. Before I move on, I want to pick, of course, the panelists' brains to give some good advice to our audience out there. I do want to check whether Marilyn had a question maybe flowing in.
Yeah, actually, there are quite a few, so it's good. I'm going to have to select them and do a pretty hard selection. So I picked two, okay? They are not addressed to anyone in particular, but I'll ask them both at once so that we can react. Sorry, I've got a background noise here, but that's okay. All right, so the two questions I have. The first one is, how has the current situation affected the relationship between researchers with governments and policymakers? Will there be permanent changes in this relationship in the future? This is the first one. And the second one comes from Japan, and from a Japanese organization, and it is about international contacts. I read it out. COVID-19 proved the importance of cross-border cooperation more than before. However, do you really think innovation ecosystem is getting stronger in spite of great difficulties in establishing new contacts?
All right, so and that's interesting. The second point comes back to what I was asking, right? I heard a positive note and kind of an optimistic view from the panelists, but I think some people have doubts. Let me start with the second question and turn it a little bit into adding the practical aspects of what do we need to do to make sure those things survive and get better and improve, rather than the lingering worry it might get worse for the ecosystems. And that's maybe the panelists can give us a bit of practical advice. Let me start with you again, Robert Jan. In a short answer, what would you do? I know you think it's going to survive, but what do the players have to do to make sure it survives?
Well, just to come back on this issue with regards to innovation ecosystems, I think they will be more and more important, because don't think it's just the corona crisis which has put now into question global supply chains. But don't forget, we had before that the huge fight between China and the United States on technology leadership, whereby the United States was forbidden certain components from China, take for instance 5G, not to be important or to use by American companies. So I think a lot of companies, I talk to at least, are rethinking their global supply chain. And I see companies in our innovation ecosystem in Brainport and Eindhoven, who for 85%, that is multinational companies, have the supply chain in our region. and others who are for 85% dependent on supply chain outside the Netherlands or outside Europe even. And those second category is really thinking, not just now because of the Corona crisis, but also thinking because of the whole continuous fight between the United States and China, let's be quite frank about it, about technology leadership. And we've seen the measures in the United States which Trump has taken, and they will not go away. Let's be clear about that. And this will have huge consequences, of course, on supply chains for certain companies. So I think there is going to be a rethought about global cooperation, global partnerships, global supply chains. I think that is unavoidable. I hope that we can go back to the situation of having great global cooperation, but also multilateralism back on the table and recognized as being important. But I think looking at what is happening with America first and Trump's interventions, looking at the Corona crisis, that we may see some changes with regard to global cooperation and global supply chains.
That will extend to research. I think we have to be honest about that to everybody, that research is not a domain free of all those influences and of all those, I would say, desires from all the sides. But the practical question, right? I mean, people can't travel. That was the part of the question. Let me jump over to Saladin. People can't travel. There is a risk that connections aren't being built. To give it a practical spin, a recommendation spin, Saladin, what would you recommend people? How do they build relationships now that the personal interaction is limited that we can have? How do we get through the next 10 to 12 months maybe without taking a serious hit on the way how people interact and how they build new relationships? In your industry, it will be essential. What recommendations would you give? What recommendations would you give?
Yep. So my recommendation, I think, with our industry within Novartis, we have turned another chapter for our company some years ago, where we have invested heavily and massively in digital, and not anticipating this pandemic, basically, but thanks to this effort, we are able to continue and maintain contact. You can imagine we are global. We are not a company based headquartered in Basel and Switzerland. We have colleagues all over the place, and in Japan, as our Japanese colleague was just asking the question. So they are as important as the ones in the US. So digital has helped us to stay connected with each other. So I think in the short term, so the digital activities, will be helpful, and they will continue to develop and will help us continue to do our business. Collaboration is a specific thing. From our business, for example, we have established, new ways of, rather than having the patients going to the hospital, they stay at home and they be connected, via different types of devices, and we can check whether they are okay or not, and whether we can continue to give the drug or not. So those are new methods that we are implementing now and developing. This will continue. Now, collaboration, scientific interactions between people is going to be still important, I believe, in the future. I think, and I'd like to open a small bracket, not a long one, but just to continue our colleagues from the politics, a politician earlier. Yes, we could have predicted somehow in a kind of a science fiction pandemic that is happening today. It's not science fiction, it's a reality. Now, I can tell you that, what is the likelihood that this is going to happen again? It's relatively high. If that one happened, it's going to happen again. With a corona or another. It could be antimicrobial resistance. You all probably heard about that. Could be a big issue as well. So we just need to go back to the basics. And what is interesting with this coronavirus, it's not scientifically such a super complicated one. It's a single RNA, it's 30,000 bases, and you see the impact it has on the world. But so many things that we are learning and we don't understand. There's only one way, is that it's collaboration. So restricting the collaboration is not going to help us to go over that and prepare for the next wave of problems. So for me, the way I see it is digital is going to help. Hopefully we will go over this period now, and there will be a vaccine sooner or later that we will be able to go for it. And then I think situation will normalize and people will reconnect again. But we have to be prepared. I have a plea for the politicians and for the policymakers. Institutions that are existing in Europe, for example, I don't mention Koch Institute, the Pasteur Institute, are so important, so solid. This is not an investment that has to happen over a year. Politicians move and change after elections. We need to have continuous investments for very deep and investment that is going to last for some time. And that helps us to be prepared for those type of problems. And so we, as the industry, we need to participate with those centers of excellence, you know, and give our share to that and continue to collaborate together. So that's how I see it, at least.
Very good. Thank you, Saladin. I mean, you kind of like, you also reflect on Karina's point about half a year ago, we had a big theme. Today we have a different theme, and maybe in 6 months we'll have yet another one. There is a change in direction every now and then, which is understandable, but certain things need to be followed through in a very consistent manner to make sure we're on the safe side. And I mean, certainly in healthcare, all of that is true. So let me jump over to
something, Carlos, on this
one.
Yeah,
please.
It's that the cost. Sorry, Carlos, just one brief point here on this one. The cost of this pandemic would have to be looked at carefully and see how much we need to invest on health and safety for people. So that's what
I think that says it all. Let me jump over to Andreas and get to the second question, namely the relationship between research and the research sector and the academic sector and politics. Anything you expect to change given the experience that we're going through, which is a historical experience for everybody, at least here in Europe?
I would say, in fact, this addresses both questions in a way. There is an expectation, certainly on our part, of a certain level of intelligence and trust on part of governments in dealing with specific aspects of what's happening now. You mentioned the innovation system. It is a fact that in the current situation, a startup that is just about at the moment where it will seek funding can get killed. It is a fact that some research projects that had a certain ambition, which gets cut because of a temporary shutdown in operations, might fail because of that. And the important part is because of that. All research ventures of ambition should be able to fail. Okay, but it is a fact that there will be some short-term damage. And I would say that as members of the research community, I would, and my colleagues would expect a certain level of intelligence understanding between the government and the community. If that happens and there is trust built up, I think the future will be bright, but there will be certain things that will have to be remedied. I emphasize again, there's some very hard hit actors in the ecosystem, the startups, which are just at the moment when they were going to travel around and sell their idea, those could die. And again, a number of other short-term damages could be, or short-term forms of damage could be inflicted on the system. I hope, I expect the governments to react accordingly. Failing that, the damage will be long-term. Succeeding in that, a relation of trust will be rebuilt. If I may interject one which has been, a little bit eroding due to an increasing level of bureaucracy. If that can be undone through swift, intelligent reaction from governments, from funding agencies, I think the end result might be positive.
Let me, of course, since it is about politics, I have to bring in Karina here. A brief answer, Karina, about from a political standpoint, what do you think is the one thing that may change in the relationship between the governments and the academic sector that comes out of this crisis? Pick one. I think this trend, the one that you think the most of.
I can't more agree because we are struggling the last years to bring back research capacities in different sectors, intersectoral. While we were last years shutting down specific scientific units in the Ministry of, let's say, Environment or Energy or whatever, now it's making more evident that basically we need a strong scientific expertise in different sectors, because to be honest, if I have to be braver now in this discussion, or I'll try to be, is that I really strongly believe that we should strengthen our strategic European supply chain, while so being locally strengthening the system, of course, keeping open to the world, but we should use all our capacities and potential. To do this, we should start to think about research and innovation, that it's not only prerogative of this bureaucracy or this director general, whatever. It's a really cross-cutting different policy fields. And one more thing which is very important, because you said where we should invest, and my push, which is very difficult, and fights are always a lot who is first on the agenda for the money. But now more than ever, we see that we underestimate the investments in research infrastructure. This is extremely important. I agree that digital infrastructure is very important, but now when it's about COVID and health systems, we saw that only half of the member states react adequately with research biobanks and basically storing and having the potential to treat data from patients. So I think we are underestimating this, and we should stop quarreling what is more important, where to invest. Research infrastructure is the basis, and we have to have it distributed all over, and so that we react quicker to next crisis.
Thank you, Karina. I have to move on. There's one more point I wanted to ask you, and leave still a few minutes maybe for another one or two questions that Marilyn may have selected. And the question is, again, please a brief answer. Some collaborations may not survive the crisis. Some will they will have started, they will be gone, and it's too bad. Of course, would have loved to keep them alive, but they just can't make it. Some, however, will go through it and may even come out stronger in some cases. And we have heard an optimism around that here. But then, what are the factors that determine whether a collaboration is a strong one that's going to go through the crisis and come out unscathed and in good shape? What are the elements that we can use to tell a more weak and fragile one from a strong one, so that looking ahead beyond the crisis, the players can actually focus on collaborations that make real sense and would be robust, and rather stay away from those that just look opportunistic and maybe having a hard time when the going gets rough. Let me start with Robert Jan. Your recommendations for strong collaborations that do survive crises.
Well, I think as Darwin already said in 1809, it's not the most intelligent or the strongest who survive, but the ones who will survive are the ones who are most responsive to change. So I think those companies who are at the moment already looking at new ways of working, digitization, Industry 4.0 was mentioned, these are the companies who will survive, and the ones who are just trying to cut costs in order to survive will not survive. So it requires, I think, leadership from the side of companies, but also I think from the side of government. I think the governments now, and that's quite an interesting phenomenon we see, who are the most popular at the moment in the crisis? These are governments and scientists. It's quite amazing. These two have a unique partnership at the moment, and in the Netherlands, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands is standing each week shoulder to shoulder with a top scientific advisor, talking about the crisis and introducing measures. And he based his political decisions purely on the science community. So the leadership, also at the level of the government, I think will be more than ever necessary. And that's why I hope that the governments will not just bail out, for instance, the airline companies, but ask something in return. Ask something in return. We need to do a lot of transitions in our economies, the energy transition, climate transition, and I really hope that the governments, who have to play a crucial role in getting the economy off the ground again, investing in the economy, that they don't just give the money, but they use the money in an intelligent way to really boost the transitions which we need. And that's the Green Deal is an example of that, but Energiewende in Germany is an example of that. So let's hope that the government plays its role, not only now, but also when we are trying to get out of the recession, which undoubtedly will hit us, in an intelligent way, not throwing money at it, but really making money available in order to accelerate the transitions and to work and to accelerate innovations.
Thank you. Andreas, you're getting back, tying it back to research collaborations, your recipe for a strong, healthy, resilient research cooperation. Which elements you want to see in there to believe that it's going to be resilient?
Well, I'm tempted to say that if it doesn't survive a crisis such as this, it was probably not worth launching in the first place. It is obvious that the human element, and that does not necessarily mean geographic proximity, the human element and the intellectual the complementarity between people should make sense after a 2-month interruption, or 5 or 6 or whatever. I mean, these things are built over time. So element number 1, that it obviously have to make sense. Element number 2, it's about people. I mean, collaborations in the academic world, at least, often start around people. In some cases, maybe opportunity, e.g. this equipment is there and I need it and this would be the best partner for it. But even if the human element isn't there, the collaboration, I don't think, will be very fruitful. And then again, that should be resilient.
Very good. Thank you. Saladin, your sector has so many collaborations. I'm sure you have your own history of good and bad ones, of successful and failed ones. What's your recommendation when the people out there listening to us go building new collaborations between industry and academia or between academic players? What should they pay attention to make sure those are strong collaborations rather than the maybe fragile ones?
Your question is very complicated, because a simple answer would be it has to be solid science, solid base, and pragmatic, clear deliverables. And as just said, if this is not surviving, crisis like this one, it was not worse. We can say that. At the same time, we should not be afraid to fail sometimes, because we want to be innovative, and disruptive means taking some courage, and some science that's not solid now may be the future. So I think it's difficult for me to answer, but I would say I would rely on expertise, and coming back to, for example, in Europe, what do we expect in Europe is strong institutions, to form students, who are able to formulate, good proposals and innovative approaches, and we will be able to collaborate with institutions that are solid, and that's what we are doing. So we rely on experience, solid science base, and that I'm confident that this is there, and we will continue to have that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Marilyn, we have 3-4 minutes left. Is there a question you can throw at us that I can pass on to the panel?
Well, then what I'll do is that I will merge several questions, because there were several questions around Horizon 2020 and the flexibility of the program. One of the questions is very down to earth. It is about a problem that researchers are facing. Those research that aren't working in their lab and therefore are not able to fill out timesheets. So that's the problem for researchers that is becoming an institutional problem. So that's the first thing, and I'll add a second bit about Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. Today, should the Commission and Science Minister focus more on how can Horizon 2020 help solve the crisis for researchers right now, or on Horizon Europe development and the MFF? So it's a complex question, but to simplify it, do you have any recommendations for the Commission on how to manage the crisis and better use Horizon 2020?
Well, the Commission...
Yeah, there is an insider here on the panel. So Robert, this one goes to you, Robert-Jan, and then I'll finish it up with Karina and a question to her as the politician. But first,
I think the European Commissioners are extremely flexible at the moment with regard to all the contracts which are signed, the grants which have been given on the Horizon 2020, because the European Commission realizes DG Research that a lot of the contractual obligations cannot be respected. And force majeure, I mean, if the labs are closed, research cannot take place. So I think the Commission is aware of it, has already extended deadlines, has already been flexible in interpretation of timesheets and contracts, things like that. So from that point of view, I'm not that worried. I hope that, however, on the multi-annual financial framework, so the next EU budget, now everyone is willing to quickly get to an agreement based on the Commission proposal, and that we see indeed a very robust, big budget for Horizon Europe. That's more than ever necessary. I would not start rethinking now about priorities or doing things different. I think it's a very visionary proposal the Commission put on the table for Horizon Europe. And I hope now quickly we can agree on the budget, on the content, so we can get the program off the ground. That is my only hope and my wish and my message.
Thank you very much, Robert-Jan. Then let me turn it over to Karina. We have a minute left, Karina, so we got to keep it short here. And may I ask you directly, it sounds very technical, a timesheet, and I don't think that the ministries will worry too much about timesheets filled in, but there are very special challenges the universities have. do the politicians lend an ear to the universities, and are they willing to step in at that point to avoid that small things create big trouble and big disruptions in the operations, trying to give a helping hand wherever possible? Is that a commitment you can give, at least for your government?
Yes, I think we react very quickly, all of us, also on national level in the National Science Fund. We gave a lot of derogations from all these small issues. I'm not hiding that we found some issues also concerning Horizon 2020, especially concerning this call on the last calls on the COVID. We call that when we have this type of emergency situations, we should look a little bit more how we can be quicker, maybe first phase first and then second, and also we always should come back to national level to see for some more capacities and background. So I believe that Horizon 2020 we are doing quite well. I just call always that we should really collaborate, as now we are collaborating. Now we are communicating, all of us. And secondly, I strongly agree that we need ambitious budget, and we need as soon as possible to agree on the new program period. Of course, for Bulgaria, apart from the big importance Horizon Europe, it's important the structural funds. And what I'm calling and trying to, and I hope that now everybody understood that structural funds are very important to be aligned with Horizon Europe, because we need quality, but also quantity and critical mass in Europe all over. So this is my call for today.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your vote here. This was pretty clear. Our time is up, unfortunately. Karina, Saladin, Andreas, and Robert Jan, I want to thank you very much for taking the time, for sharing your insights with us, and of course the audience there. I thought it was an engaged and insightful discussion. I hope our audience takes away a couple of nuggets from that, and stay tuned. It was fun to have you on the show. I wish everybody a great day, and of course, stay healthy.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.